Hi, I'm Shane Phillips, the CEO of the Phillips Group, and we are here with Andrew Stotts, the Vice President, Learning and Development for Etihad Aviation Group, and this is HRTV at the Human Resource Summit and Expo. Welcome, Andrew.
Shane, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and you have a wealth of experience having worked across some of the largest organizations in the region. And one of the interesting things we were talking about was how do you drive learning engagement?
Yeah, well, for me, for us, our whole methodology, our whole strategy really is based around what we would call our 4 key levers. And those 4 key levers, 2 of them we believe are massively outside of our control, and 2 of them are massively within our control. So I'll explain perhaps about the first 2 levers, which we believe are kind of outside of our control. The first one is this idea that you must do something, Shane, because we don't think that really works. From a learning perspective, if I say, Shane, you must do something, you'll probably go and do it from a compliance point of view, but actually the quality of the learning, the quality of the experience, and how you actually interact with the learning is probably not good value for money from a learning perspective, and probably from a business perspective. The second area where we don't believe we have too much influence is personal choice, and that's that Shane wants to do something. And if Shane wants to do something, it's almost impossible for him, for us to stop him doing it. So that kind of they're the outliers in the levers. But the other 2 really important areas where we really focus is, first of all, Shane can do it. So it's making sure that Shane has lots of accessibility to it. He can get multiple channels into the learning. So the way that the learning is presented to him comes in different formats. We have a whole range ranging from things like VILT, so virtual instructor-led training, instructor-led training sessions. We obviously do very, very popular now is a lot of micro-learning. So we do a lot of videos in the sort of 60 to 90 second range, which I think is really important for learners. And they kind of stack onto each other, so they kind of build through the topic, which is really good. So it's about accessibility and can. And then finally, of course, we wrap the can in why Shane should do this. So those 4 levers, as we mentioned, the first one is that kind of must lever, which we think it has a purpose, but mostly around compliance. And when you're forcing people to learn things, generally we find that they're not as engaged as we'd like them to be. Obviously, learning is a personal choice, and we focus massively on that and saying actually we're going to empower the learner, Shane, the employee, to actually do the learning if Shane wants to do it. We're not going to punish him if he doesn't want to do it, but there are consequences of that, and he's making a conscious decision not to engage with the learning. So for example, that might mean that he perhaps wouldn't be as promoted as quickly as he would like to, or maybe earn the right levels of bonuses because he's not really engaged with the organisation. And the 2 areas we really focus, first of all, is about accessibility, so Shane can access the learning, and then the second part really is about why Shane or the employee or the learner should access the learning. So I'm absolutely delighted to discuss this or anything else with anyone who's interested. Just reach out and ask me.
And so it sounds like you're really going down the road of this personalization, so you're making accessible the learning. If I want to do it, I can. If I don't want to, it's fine, but I'm sure that would affect my career path as well. 100%. And so you're letting me kind of pick and choose how I want to develop myself and almost sculpt my own career path. Yeah, so we've made it much easier than that, because the way that we have our structure now, from the learning curriculum, is a very, very simple thing. So we have our 8 knowledge areas. I won't bore you with the detail around that, but there's things like coaching, planning, presenting with impact is about understanding the culture that we work in. For example, that's just 4 of the knowledge areas. Then we have our sort of recognised career levels. So we have a very simple sort of structure as far as how I grow and develop within the organisation. So we have, admin to executive. So there are 5 levels. The middle level being a manager level, officer being supervisor, and senior manager being a kind of the step before executive. If you take that 5 and you multiply it then by 8, what you would get is 40. And then we have those kind of 40 boxes are then broken into what we call knowing, doing and being. So the knowing becomes the structure of the curriculum. It's the point of measure. So for example, if Shane is an administrator and he is talking about or learning about the topic of coaching, for Shane that means that he would need to understand the importance of using open questions, and he would understand the importance of actively listening.
they will be the measuring points. Yeah. We then educate against those 2 measuring points. We then give the manager, so Shane's boss, Mohammed, and say, right, Mohammed, if Shane was doing this well, if he was actively listening and he was asking open questions, this is what you would see, Mohammed. So you would actually see that kind of learning going on, which makes it really easy for Mohammed, because sometimes actually Mohammed doesn't know what good active listening looks like and doesn't know what good asking of open questions looks like. So there's some challenges there, and there's some ambiguity between Shane, the employee, and Mohammed, the line manager. Yeah, so there's some information there we needs to be kind of like closed. And then the final part for us is about why it's important for Shane to do this. So we know that if Shane understands why it's important to actively listen, why it's important for the employee to listen, why it's important to ask things like our TED questions, Stotts, tell me about, explain to me, describe to me, why it's important that Shane would learn that information, it will help his career and help him develop, then of course it becomes a much easier journey for Shane. We're effectively empowering the employee to take that journey with us. And it's, as I said, it's very, very structured. And if you want to know more about anything we're doing around the knowledge areas, or anything we're doing around my performance, or anything we're doing about how we measure and engage employees, or anything about how we can sort of grow and develop people, and even the whole curriculum structure, always happy to talk about it, Shane.
And aviation, a huge emphasis on training. How many training days a year should an employee get? Is that a metric that you look at? And
we have, it's very, very interesting. What we know from some of our platforms, some of our tools, is that the more that we sort of microfy the learning, the more learner engagement we get. So we have huge catalogues, huge resources now available for team members, and we're seeing, literally tens of thousands of people sort of like, signing in and doing their own learning, taking responsibility for their learning. It's a very, very beautiful story from my old Starbucks days. And when I was actually, on this particular day, it was 9th of May, hopefully you can entertain me for 2 seconds while I tell the story, but 9th of May, Red Square in Moscow, and there's a huge sort of celebration or commemoration really of the Russian kind of war dead. And it's a bit of a scary day, because if you're not Russian, you're kind of there in Red Square and there's lots of tanks and ballistic missiles and, the president's kind of taking the salute and that kind of stuff. But I was with a very good friend of mine, and he said, should we go and get a cup of coffee? I said, yes, let's get a cup of coffee. And of course, there's a Starbucks, because there's a Starbucks everywhere, and we went to Starbucks, and in Starbucks, basically, as I walked through the door of Starbucks, something quite peculiar happened. So although I had a lot of time working with Starbucks in Russia, and most of my time was spent with sort of Starbucks in Turkey and all around the Middle East, but actually walking into that Starbucks store, as I walked through the front door, the barista recognized me. Yeah, so I was quite surprised that she recognized me. That was the first thing. The importance of the story is, of course, I was then saying, "Oh, wow, you know who I am." She said, "Yes, because you're on my phone every single morning. You're on my telephone, so I see you, presenting videos, talking about topics, giving updates on comms. So you're a very familiar face to me." And that was an interesting revelation to me, because I kind of suddenly thought, "Wow, people have that kind of that instant connection through video." So that was quite fascinating, and as many employees did with that company, with that organisation, with my previous employer, and is increasingly the case within EAG, that conversation then sort of led to the next part of the conversation, which was around, Stotts, how do I get promoted? I don't want to be a barista, I want to be a supervisor, I want to be a store manager, I want to be a DM, a district manager, I want to kind of grow my career within Starbucks in this case. And it was quite interesting, because we were able very, very quickly to identify what learning she'd actually done on that journey. And actually it transpired, like it does with many employees, when you actually look at their learning history and how engaged they are in their learning, actually they're not that engaged in their learning. Yeah. So we can actually use that and say, actually, do you know what, in your case, Shane, what we can see here, the data suggests that you're not doing the learning that we would really require you to do to take that journey with us. We would love you, Shane, to take that journey with us, but we're not seeing the interaction, the engagement that we would like to see. Shane, of course, that's a personal choice, because if you would like to stay as a barista, we would love you to stay as a barista. But if you do want to become a supervisor and a store manager and a district manager, these are the types of things you would need to master on that journey. And actually laying those things out, and of course that then leads to a conversation which kind of goes like, wow, I didn't know that. So it empowers the line manager with the employee, because actually the line manager, Mohammed, when he's with Shane, can actually say, do you know what, Shane, you go on about being promoted, you go on about getting a pay rise, you go on about earning more money with the organisation, whatever organisation that is. But actually, Shane, you're not really demonstrating the energy or the enthusiasm or the engagement around learning. And if you want to do that learning, we'd be delighted to help you, and we can take you through that journey. Yeah, and that really kind of helps to engage learners, because I think if you understand the path you're taking, your career journey, if you understand, you back to my very earlier comments around wanting to, can, should, and must. If you really want to take the journey, it's almost unstoppable for the employee. So the more that we're going to go down that route, the more engaged employees we get. So it's a very that's a long answer to a very, very good question, but what goes into making a successful EAG employee is many, many months of education, many, many months helping people master the skills they require to do their jobs within the organisation.
Well, thank you so much for coming on HRTV.
Shane, it's a pleasure.
It's a great window into the learning and development of the aviation industry. This is HRTV, and we're broadcasting from Zabeel Hall 5 at the HR Summit and Expo, the largest HR event in the Middle East. Stay tuned for our next video. It's coming right up.